All right, at this time, I'll call the meeting to order for Administration and Finance Committee. Can I get a roll call, please?
Okay. Dr. Holly Bophy?
Present.
Dr. Bophy is present. Mr. James Mr. Tony Davis?
Present.
Mr. Davis is present. Ms. Donna Edmiston?
Present.
Mr. Edmiston is present. Mr. James Garvey? Mr. Garvey is present. Ms. Sandra Holloway? Ms. Holloway is present. Dr. Gary Jones?
Present.
Dr. Jones is present. Ms. Jada Lewis? Ms. Lewis is present. Ms. Kira Orange-Jones?
Present.
Ms. Orange-Jones is present. Mr. Thomas Rock?
Present.
Mr. Rock is present. Dr. Lori Thomason?
Present.
Mr. Thomason is present. Ms. Doris Vautier?
Present.
Ms. Vautier is present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. What's our first item?
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding item 7.1.
Can I get a motion for that from the board?
So moved.
So moved in a second. 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 Don't you announce?
Until we get used to the voices,
Yeah,
it would
moved by Dr.
it
Bopher,
would help.
second by Jim Garvey.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any discussion from the board at this time? Not hearing any. Do we have any? If there's no discussion, do I hear any opposition against the motion? None. So the motion passes. What's our next item?
Next item is on page 19, item 4.1, consideration of the discussion of the MFP formula. The recommendation is to receive.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Bophy.
Second.
Second. Second by Ms. Orange-Jones. You shall know. All right. Do we have any discussion from the board this time? Not hearing any discussion. Do I have any objection? No objection. Motion passes. Next item.
Your next item is on page 29, item 5.1, consideration of a report from education finance staff concerning type 2 and type 3B charter school budgets and expenditure reports, including irregularities or concerns. The recommendation is to receive.
Can I get a motion from the board to receive?
So move.
Moved by Jim Garvey. Second. Second by Ms. St. Holloway. Any discussion from the board? No discussion from the board. Any objections? Not hearing any objections. Motion passes. Next item.
Your next item is item 5.2 on page 34, consideration of federal state grants and allocations to LEAs, type 2 charters, type 5 charters, approved non-public schools and community-based organizations, competitive and other. The recommendation is to approve.
Can I get a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Garvey, second by Dr. Bophy. Do I understand, the superintendent, you have some comments you want to make to this?
I do, and I don't want to block Ms. Boucher also because I know she has comments. Members, just to introduce this item, at most meetings there is, as you know, a kind of comprehensive item under which all of the allocations that the department is making per specific grants come for your consideration. These are monies that are allocated almost exclusively to local education agencies, being school systems, private and public, as well as charter schools. Occasionally they are allocations made under specific grant programs to outside entities. Today specifically, you're considering allocations that regard early childhood education. You're regarding those that regard specific grants, long-term grants for curriculum issues. You're making allocations for some that are wraparound services such as youth suicide prevention. You are making an allocation to a group of superintendents who have established a nonprofit academy to prepare future superintendents within Louisiana. And you're considering a set of grants to school systems regarding principal support and principal development for in-service principals. This all comes within allocations made because of specific programs and their requirements. Sometimes those are federal monies that just flow through the Department of Education and they're simply allocated on a formula basis. Sometimes they're allocated on a competitive basis. But almost always these are funds that have specific programmatic guidelines, sometimes broad, sometimes narrow, and recommendations regarding to whom, therefore, the monies should be allocated. They are not contracts, nor are they decisions about the programs themselves. The programs have already been established, the contracts have not. You're simply just approving a pass-through of funds from somewhere else to somewhere else. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. Any discussion or comments from the board? Ms. Fauché?
Yeah, in these allocations, in number 2, which is, I guess, a reimbursement, St. Bernard Parish School System is a $60 reimbursement under number 2, and under number 7 with the state systemic improvement grant, there's a little over $15,000 allocated to my school system. So on those 2 items, I think I need to recuse myself.
Excellent. Duly noted. Got it here. Just make sure we speak up as board members so that the entire board can hear. The audience has the benefit of the microphone, but not the board.
Number 2 and number 7.
Any other discussion from the board before I move to comments? If not, let me go ahead and call down Dr. I believe Matthias, Hollis Milton, and Jim Meza, please. Whoever wants to start.
Mr. Chair, can I invite my colleague to join us? She's on the card there, Dr. Pujo.
Yes.
She's the president of our organization.
Dr. Pujo.
Patrice Pujo, Superintendent of Schools in Ascension Parish. First, let me congratulate the new board. I certainly look forward to working with all of you and am excited about our prospects moving forward with this leadership assembled here today. We have a small group of superintendents who have been working on the concept of an aspiring superintendent's academy. We have been just doing the research and trying to put together programming. We are seeking funding from a variety of sources. We have done some outreach to other superintendents and to the GLASS organization, trying to coordinate some efforts. We think that one of the most important things that we can do as sitting superintendents is to create opportunity to have deep professional learning for aspiring superintendents. The job is difficult, it is challenging, it is so important, and leadership is the key to the success of our students. That being said, I do understand that LASS, the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents, has had some dialogue about forming their own academy, and we certainly appreciate that. We would hope that we could work together, but we are here seeking money so that we can continue our effort of development and create this opportunity for aspiring superintendents.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm Jim Meza. I'm the executive director of the Louisiana Superintendent's Academy, retired superintendent from Jefferson Parish and dean of the College of Education at the University of New Orleans. About 1 year ago, working with a group of colleagues, all superintendents at the time, we felt that we wanted to contribute to our role as superintendents. And we felt that the superintendency there's no clear path of preparation. Most people come from within their district, some people come from outside, and then we question whether they have the cultural sensitivity to deal with our own districts. but there's no technical executive skills. Typically, a superintendent centers around the most important CEO in a community. For example, in Jefferson Parish, it had 7,000 employees, $600 million budget, 80 schools. There is no single method to prepare me for that particular job. I had 40 years of experience. We felt that executive leadership is needed for those who want to pursue that position as superintendency. Resource allocation. Try to understand where money is being spent and what type of return are we getting on that investment. Human capital is critical. We all agree that there's nothing more important than retaining and developing and hiring qualified teachers. We have to have a repertoire of strategies to reach out to bringing the best people into the classroom. Human resources is a major part of the job. The other course, as you well know, comes to instructional leadership. We have to look beyond ourselves. We continue to fall at the bottom. We can do better. We feel that we can bring in national experts, coupled with our own expertise in Louisiana, and build a set of skills that aspiring superintendents can develop, which would have immediate impact on their own districts, but also bring them to a higher level of readiness as they move to a superintendent's position. This has been good work. I've put the summary of the work in a packet for you. We're not finished. We have to operationalize these standards. Those standards came from our superintendents. We also are partnering with Our Lady of Holy Cross College. They've just launched a doctorate in executive leadership. We brought in a group of prospective candidates, all being in supervisory positions in school districts, asked them, would this be attractive to them? It rated very, very high, saying that they wanted their work to be included towards some type of academic degree. We're working with Holy Cross. They also will serve as our fiscal agent if you approve this funding, and we're real excited about it. We're also excited about joining LAS, also working with Scott and LSBA. We think we have to do this in a unified effort, but we don't want to stop. We're almost there. We can bring people in. We can move to the next level. We want to have our first cohort launch this summer.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Orange-Jones?
Yes. First of all, thank you both, Jim and Patrice, for your leadership. Can you hear me?
Turn on the mics. No one can hear anything.
The answer is no.
And we did check with the technical people, and they said that the microphones are turned up as loud as they can go. But to me, they do seem lower than normal.
Yeah.
But if we speak louder and make sure we're directly to the microphones, I think we can get it done.
All right.
Excuse me just a second here. Mr. Jones, or Davis, are theirs turned up as well? Because it's very, very hard to hear the presenters.
Yeah, we've got everything on to our knowledge at this point.
Okay.
We'll continue working on it, but we
All
just
right.
ask that everyone who's giving comments, please speak as loudly as you can and directly into the microphone.
Please. Thank you.
I think this is an important program. I think it has huge, long-reaching benefits to the state, certainly. Curious how you're thinking about recruitment. So how you're thinking about identification of the individuals who will ultimately be in the cohort. Will they be recommended by their superintendents? Will there be what is that process like?
We're in the process of developing the criteria as well as the selection process. But generally, we would like the person to be nominated by their school superintendent. We want to certainly do this in partnership. Part of the program involves a mentoring aspect where they will spend quite a bit of time in another district, a district that has proven to be effective in one of the standards that we've adopted as part of our program. The group will be highly selective. We're talking about possibly 15 candidates in the first cohort. Not all candidates would be necessarily from a school district, but the high majority of them would.
Phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meza.
Dr. Meza, I see this as an 8G grant piece that you're looking for. Do you anticipate doing this on an annual basis, or is this a one-time?
Well, this is a private-public partnership. We have received some private monies. This is considered to be, I guess, startup monies. I can't say if we'll get enough private monies to sustain it eventually. That's our plan. But as AG is to develop innovative programs, and I think this would be considered an innovative program, we would probably come back for, if needed, for another round of funding at some point.
So at this point, you're just looking for initial funding,
Yes.
or is there an anticipation that this will become a recurring item for us?
I don't anticipate this being recurring, but I can't say for sure that it wouldn't be that way, because you know how difficult it is to raise money.
Are you a politician, Jim?
Yes, Dr. Jones.
All right.
I
Thank you
know
very
what you're
much.
trying to get me to say, Dr. Jones.
All right, Mr. Garvey, you have a question?
Yes, hearing Dr. Mesa speak about the AG and appropriateness of it, I realized that he left out some of his resume, some of his past working experience. And if I have it right, that would include the executive director of BESE at one point and state superintendent? I thought so. I just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to write the AG guidelines that were passed by a constitutional amendment.
Excellent, thank you. We do have another comment card over here we need to get to.
Thank you. Good afternoon, or good morning, I should say, BESE members. Welcome to a new year. We look forward to working with you. My name is Hollis Milton. I'm the superintendent of West Louisiana Parish Schools. I'm also the president of the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents. If I could, I'd like to bring to the table with me, I have Superintendent Brian Lejeune, who is the vice president of the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents, and also Superintendent Mike Falk, who spoke earlier, that he speaks on behalf of LAS. I want you to know that for all of the reasons they've said, we believe that there should be a superintendent's academy. There's no disagreement there. We think it's timely. We think it's needed. Our biggest concern right now is you've heard some very sobering news about the budget. We would hate to see dollars be pulled out of the classroom to create this, especially when with LAS, in collaboration with LSBA, has worked on private funders. We feel like we can do the same thing. We even look forward to working with the group that's creating this. At the same time, we would rather you defer this item because we're concerned about classroom dollars or dollars leaving the classroom. We think we can create a wonderful program. If you decide to approve this, LAS and LSBA will make a decision whether we move forward, and I believe that we will, with our own exciting program because we've done some of the same work that this group has. And I'll yield at this time.
Brian Lejeune, Superintendent of Schools at Jeff Davis Parish, and as Hollis said, Vice President of the Superintendents Association and President next year. It pains me to be here to have this discussion because we set up a committee that I am chairing that will meet in the very near future to make this happen. And I was made aware last week that this item was on the agenda with no information from the superintendents that put this together that they were coming forth with this. So it is disheartening that we as superintendents cannot communicate with each other to make this happen, and I hope as president of the association I can work with Hollis and Mike and make that work in a better way so we can make that happen. But we are very interested in making this happen. We are concerned about using AG money to make that happen, and we will work to provide opportunities to get superintendents to be training to get them in a position that they can be successful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, probably speaking as the third longest serving superintendent in the state of Louisiana with 23 years experience, I've seen many superintendents come and go, and I've seen superintendents successful and unsuccessful. And some of the points Dr. Mesa brought out are very important because now in this ever-changing educational society that we live in, it's important to properly prepare people to take over, in many cases, the biggest industry in a community. I think that some good can come out of this if we forge a working relationship one with another. And the ones who will benefit are the students and the teachers in the school systems who will have somebody who will at least have an awareness of what things can be done to be successful. I think we want to work collaborative with Dr. Mesa and his group. We want to work with LSBA because, after all, the school boards in this state are the ones who hire the local superintendent. And it's important that they have a pool of applicants to choose from. So we would ask that you consider our request from our president. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you all. Let me get a few more. We have more comment cards. I misspoke earlier. And Dr. Matthews, are you in the room? I think I said Matthias, but it's Dr. Matthews. Please come up. You had a comment card. Also join her, Scott Richard, Superintendent Martin, and Superintendent Kevin George, please. Dr. Matthews, we'll start with you.
Good morning. And welcome to your first meeting, most of you. We're happy to have you. We know that there's wonderful, exciting work going on, a lot of hard work that you will be facing, and I just want to commend you on taking office and getting ready to move forward. I'm here. My name is Joanne Matthews. I'm the superintendent of Lafourche Parish Schools. Been working in this business for a while, and fortunately, in my district, I've been there for over 10 years as the superintendent in one particular school system. That hadn't been done since the 1920s. Constant turnover in districts is something that you hear time and time again from, for whatever reason, retirement, illness, or issues with boards, etc. As you've heard from Dr. Meza, we feel that it's important that we move ahead and have something out there for our superintendents. We need to have them trained. We need to provide them information. Not sure if you're aware, but several superintendents in this state have gone out of state to Texas to participate in academies over the years. I am one of those superintendents. While the training was wonderful, provided a lot of leadership skills, still what's lacking there is about Louisiana, about the MFP, about 16th section properties. How do you deal with sales taxes in the state of Louisiana? And it's time that we move forward, and move forward now on behalf of those 700,000 kids that we have here in the state, and not delay. I ask you to please approve this, and we are working and will continue to work collaboratively with all organizations. Certainly it's important that new superintendents coming on understand how to work with their school boards, understand how to work with the public. Those are all standards that we are looking forward to developing and working and moving along. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Yes, sir.
Yes, good morning. My name is Kevin George, and I am Superintendent of Schools in St. John the Baptist Parish. Again, congratulations to all of you. Look forward to working with all of you guys. Yes, I'm one of the superintendents who have worked with Dr. Meza to help to bring this to you today. But let me just say this. It does pain me, as Superintendent Lejeune just said, we don't, as superintendents, want to work against one another. Actually, we do want to work with LSBA. We want to work with LAS as well. And we have a structure in the organization that we've just created that I know have reached out to LAS and LSBA, and there's been different emails going back and forth. So this is not a surprise situation. This is a situation that we feel is very important. Just as you stated, just as a lot of folks have stated, leadership means a lot. So when you have leadership and you have excellent leadership, that's when a school system moves forward. And when you have an excellent, I've never seen a school system, an excellent school system, without a great leader. So the funding would definitely reach the classrooms because that leader would implore its teachers and its organization and its students to achieve. And that's what we want to do. It's great to defer and continue to analyze things, but at some point you have to take that first step forward. We think today could be that first step. We think this is a program, I don't think anyone can argue against the merits of the need for an academy, and it's time now to go ahead and take that step forward, and we're asking you today for your support. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Garvey?
Yes, I had a question for the speaker, if I could.
Yes, sir.
I have heard about the need for this kind of program for years, and it sounds very exciting. I think it would do great things. And it's exciting to hear that there's possibly another group out there that may want to open a second such program. If there were two programs in the state of Louisiana trying to educate superintendents or potential superintendents, do you think that that would cause a problem for your program if there was another program out there?
Well, I think the optimal road to choose would be to have one program so that we're not working in isolation. But to answer your question directly, I'm not exactly sure what that other program will look like. We're working to work with aspiring superintendents, and that's what we're trying to do. I'm not exactly sure what the other program will be about. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Ms. Richard?
Good morning again. Scott Richard, Executive Director of the School Boards Association. For the record, I want to make clear that there is no formal arrangement or formal contractual relationship between the Louisiana School Boards Association and this proposed entity that's before you today. We have had some dialogue, verbal discussions, initial verbal discussions. We've had exchanged emails. And there is no ill will whatsoever from the School Boards Association towards any superintendent, nor ex-superintendent Mesa from Jefferson Parish, who will be leading this effort as I understand things. I'm not sure if the board is privileged to the budget document or the item description. I've been requesting that from the board and received it last night at about 9 o'clock, if I recall correctly. And ladies and gentlemen, this is where our fundamental concern is at from the School Boards Association. Again, no ill will towards any superintendent or any entity that wants to train potential leaders for traditional public schools or charter schools or any such program. There are several that exist in Louisiana, not to mention the very fine programs that exist in Louisiana at our various higher institutions and our universities across the state that have exemplary programs to train folks to get them ready for leadership positions. The initial discussions are just that. The fundamental concern and why we're at the table today, again, not the best timing and not the best opportunity to address the new BESE board on this issue, is the budget proposal, is the funding source. It wasn't made clear that the funding source would be HG dollars until the BESE agenda came out, until further discussion occurred to try to retrieve those documents from the department. The fundamental disagreement is the use of HG funds. If you recall, those of you that are veterans of the board, the School Boards Association and the Superintendents Association brought a bill to the legislature back in 2014 to revise the way HG dollars are expended. That bill was House Bill 594, sponsored by Representative Ed Price, and it would have closed the door on a lot of these allocations, these flow-through dollars that come through the department and BESE. Many of you have heard the discussions of Secretary of Treasurer Kennedy in the past about the billions of dollars that flow through this organization. And we have a fundamental concern with that as well. There needs to be more accountability, and we basically object to the use of HG dollars. There's billions of dollars of contracts that flow through the department and that come before you as BESE members. That's why your role is so important, to make sure there's accountability tied to these dollars. We would like to see that $103,750 go to what we proposed back in 2014. Summer remediation, technology integration, and pre-K services. We all know that that's the best research-proven methods to increase student achievement in Louisiana. So we fundamentally would like to see 8G dollars flow to those initiatives that are no-brainers to increase student achievement. The other piece that we have a problem with at the School Boards Association is we want to be independent. We don't want to be emboldened to any benefactor or donor, and we don't want to compete for 8G dollars for this purpose. We think we can put a program together working with our universities and other stakeholders in our state, and we look forward to working with this group should the grant be approved. But I can tell you today that the School Boards Association does not endorse, is not affiliated, is not contractually obligated whatsoever to this entity, mainly due to the use of 8G funds. And I will be informing my board of directors in the next coming days of this entity so they are informed, so we can explain this to all of our membership. Not any ill will towards the group, but the methodology, the funding source, and the fact that we're just getting 8G, the budget letter last night as to how the dollars would flow. We look forward to working with this group should the grant be approved. But again, we can't endorse it in any way as the employers of superintendents because of the fundamental disagreement with the funding source at this point in time and other private donors that may be holding this group to be emboldened to carry out their respective framework. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Superintendent Watt, you have something you want to add?
Yes, thank you. Members, in moments like this where there are difficult and complicated arguments being made on both sides, I view my job as to try to provide you facts, as those of you who report to boards do, on the issue. Obviously, this has been proposed as part of the state's 8G plan, so I bring it to you because I think it's a good idea. But I respect the points that are being made on the other side, which are that dollars are tight and that there's duplication is never a good thing. So let's talk about the facts for a second. 8G is a large allocation that, a large pot of money, let's say in the $10 to $12 million range each year for K-12 education for the state, that is then split with another large allocation that goes to the local districts. That state portion you approve a budget for. In other words, you approve certain categories. You say we want to spend some on this, we want to spend some on that. And you approved, the previous incarnation of the board, approved a large category for the training and development of educators. Already a lot of those funds have been allocated, sent to school systems, charter schools, for purposes of training educators. So this board has already approved the fact that there are monies to be set aside for training educators. Now you can argue, should that have been the case? Fair point, but it's already been done. Second, you could argue, is the wisest use of training educators training superintendents? Fair question. But here's what I would say. This is $100,000, which sounds like a lot of money, but in the scheme of a more than $10 million pot of money, you're talking about short of 1% of it. And in my view, if we're sending the state's top education executives to Texas to be trained, that is a problem that is urgently resolved. Too often, these things start with this board and proceed down to the locals, and I've been in many conversations with Dr. Jones and Ms. Voce about this very issue, rather than the locals coming to us and saying, this is how we want to solve the problem, and us using their ideas. And we've been criticized for that. All of the disagreements at the table notwithstanding, this is a small piece of money from a pool that was already dedicated to that purpose and approved by the board, coming from some of the finest educators in our state. I find that a hard proposal to turn down, issues that Dr. Milton and Mr. Richard have raised notwithstanding. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. If I don't have any more discussion, that's the end of our comments. Don't have any more discussion from the board. I'm sorry, Ms. Voce.
Yeah. I think this is a really great concept and long overdue. I mean, the goals and the objectives of the Superintendent's Academy is something that I think is very laudable and something that we do need to pursue. Having said that, it really pains me to take a look at what's happening right now. I do know for a fact, having been in the LAS leadership for the last several years, that through LAS in conjunction with LSBA and LACE, and Representative Pope is back there, who is the executive director of LACE, we have been in the process of developing a similar program. In fact, LAS has a committee that's been formed, chaired by Superintendent Lejeune, for the exact same purpose. And that particular leadership over the last 18 months was really unaware that this, it seems like, parallel course was being taken.
Doris, can you talk louder?
Was unaware that the same course, maybe, of action was being taken until the last few months. So when I know Mr. Garvey, you talked about maybe having more than one program, but I think the strength of this program, as Superintendent George was alluding to, would be in a united effort of everyone together doing this. So I'm hoping that in the future we're going to be able to see a little bit more collaboration to get something together that's going to be beneficial for everyone. As far as, because duplicative programs with limited resources, very, very difficult to maintain. I do know that through LAS and LSBA and LACE, there are some private funders who have already made some commitments to basically fund a similar program to this. If this board does approve this HE funding, and I realize it is one of the designated funding objectives for this year, this, from what I'm looking at in here, this grant is for a 6-month period through June 30th. I'm hoping that it would just be a one-time startup allocation for some planning and not a recurring request, because I do think that this initiative can be implemented and maintained through private sources of funding rather than coming to take those limited HE resources that I would hope, I know later on in the agenda, we're looking at ways to potentially fund early childhood, our pre-K programs, which, as we compete for these limited resources, all of these objectives that we're looking at, it's very difficult to say which is more important than the other with a finite pot of money. So if this is approved today or tomorrow, I would hope that the group with the Superintendent's Academy would not be coming back and asking for an additional allocation from HE sources in the future.
Thank you. Dr. Jones.
As I look at this agenda item, it looks like the recommendation and the motion on the table is to approve the package as a whole.
That's correct.
If this is an item of contention, would it be appropriate to pull that piece out and vote on it separately? Or would we need to stay with what we are?
Yeah, we can certainly break it apart if we think that's what's necessary in this case.
I'm just not sure. I mean, I have to tell you, as a former superintendent, and I know every one of the people on that program, and I have great respect for everyone in that packet, but I also haven't been the former president of the Superintendent's Association. I was a little stunned. I didn't realize that. I thought this was a collaborative effort. So I think maybe it might be good to vote on the rest of them and approve the rest of them and then vote on that one separately.
If we're going to do that, we're going to need a motion to pull that one item out and vote the rest as a whole.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
May I speak just to a couple of the technical then elements of this?
Certainly.
What I'm hearing from members is an agreement on concept, but a concern about implementation issues. And my general guidance to the board on this would be, if possible, don't hold up implementation, but guide implementation if you have concerns. For example, if you don't approve an allocation, 2 more months of a fiscal year that only has 6 months left elapse. So all you do is if you don't make an allocation, you restrict the ability of someone, whoever it is, to spend those funds from 6 months to 4 months. If you have concerns, and I totally understand them as Ms. Vaucher and Dr. Jones have both expressed, about the two groups not working together on this to unify their proposal, you can give a specific, either express a desire through a motion or direct the department to do something that will incent people to come together without wasting 2 more months of a fiscal year that is half over.
All right, thank you, Superintendent. Mr. Garvey, you have a point to this?
Mr. Chairman, to follow up on what the superintendent was saying, you're saying we can approve this today, and if the second group comes back with suggestions on how to maybe improve what we approved today, how to improve it, we can make suggestions to the group that we approved today based on the input from the second group.
Well, yes, or I think you could even make it stronger than that. I mean, you'll need whoever makes
And we
the
could
motion.
do that in March, at a March meeting.
Or you could, I would probably suggest you do it now, but here's.
No, but we could bring the suggestions up in March, the suggested changes in March, 2 months from now, and pass those suggestions on to the group.
Well, here's what I would maybe propose. I would maybe, you are the grant maker. You can put conditions on it. I would, if you're inclined to make the grant, I would maybe go ahead and make the grant, but require that as part of as a condition, that the organization receiving the grant engage the Superintendent's Association and return to the March meeting with a report on how they will unify their efforts.
That sounds great.
All right.
I'd just like to make a technical. It was mentioned about the budget. I want the board to know that there are no salaries in that budget. The budget is to support the training of the participants and some operational expenses. There is some funding for experts that come in and work with our candidates during some of the summer residency training. But this is not to pay anyone a salary. This is to support the project.
Duly noted. Thank you. Dr. Jones, you had something else you want to add?
Yeah, in terms of my motion, I think we may be premature here. I think let's go ahead and do that and see what the outcome of that actual motion is before we get concerned about whether or not we need to take other steps with it. Is there any reason why we can't do it that way?
The motion that stands before the board right now is on separating this one item out of the allocation to votes. We'll have 2 votes then, one for this particular item and then one for the bulk, the remainder.
Right.
So,
Would it be out of order to entertain a motion just to defer this one item until March after they meet?
I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the actual order would be to vote on separating or not, and then if it's separated, when that item comes up, we would defer at that point. So as it stands right now, with no further discussion, the vote you have in front of you is to separate this one item out of the allocation and then vote on the other in bulk. Do I hear any objections to the separation?
No.
No objections, then the motion passes that we will separate that one item out. So now, what do we have in front of us then at this point? On the vote? Okay, so the motion we have in front of us at this point is for the remainder of these allocations, not for the academy here. So, without any further discussion on that, do I hear any objections to funding those? No objections, that motion passes.
Except I'm recusing 2 and 7.
Please note. Now, the motion in front of us at this time is on whether to approve the funding for the academy. So do I hear any discussion from? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So I need a motion to approve funding.
And I
Ms.
second.
Holloway? Seconded by Dr.
Opie.
Okay, so now I need discussion from the board.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I think that it's important, and we might need Ms. Trippo to help out with this if I miss anything. I know that the superintendent went over it, but for new members, just to get a sense of 8G. So when we talk about the MFP, we're talking about the funding formula that ultimately funds our schools. 8G is different. So 8G is the trust fund that we have in place that is supposed to be used for innovation. And so we will continue to have conversations about 8G. We'll set forth a budget, so we start in figuring out how much money we have. Another step is to figure out how we want to start thinking about those allocations. But it's also, I think, important for you to understand the structural difference in 8G. So part of that funding goes directly to the districts. And so that's our block funding. And so that goes to the districts for the districts to spend the money based on the various ways that we put forward. And we'll have that conversation in the course of that funding cycle. The other piece is what we call the statewide piece, and that's what we're talking about today. So decisions, there's decisions made over time. At some point, we made a decision to add development of leadership, which is a component of this, into the way we spend AG dollars. So that decision was made already. At another point, we made a decision about how much was going to be allocated through block that will go directly to the districts for them to make decisions in terms of how they will spend it. And then there was a decision made for what we call statewide. And when we talk about statewide, these are funds that Superintendent White considers in all of the work we need to do and what strategies we need to put in place to fund that work in order to be successful with kids. And so I want you to understand that this is funding that was determined that was going to be statewide already. Funding that was leadership development is a key component of all of the different things that we had talked about. And that these are out of those dollars that Superintendent White has looked at the broader scope of what our needs are as a state and is recommending to us that some of these dollars would go to this particular program. So I just wanted to give you that background story and know that as we continue to work with AG, there'll be a lot of decisions that you make over time. And this is $100,000 out of how many million for this year? Okay. So about $11.5 million. This is $100,000 out of that 11.5. So I think it's important just to understand how we got to this conversation.
Thank you for that information. Mr. Garvey?
Yeah, good question for Ms. Bofi. Just to make sure I'm understanding you right. You're saying that this is an appropriate use of this money?
Yes, Mr. Garvey.
And in fact,
it's more than appropriate. It's a strategic use of this money.
Thank you.
Do I have any other discussion? Ms. Edmondson, do you have a...
Mr. Davis, as Dr. Jones had suggested, I just have a problem with two separate entities doing the same thing. And so if someone could clarify what the difference would be, I would appreciate it. I'm just a little stumped on two separate things that appear to be the same.
Do we have anybody who wants to speak to that, Superintendent? Or
it also might just be worth recounting a little bit of the history on this. And I don't think that we should get into a he said, she said, but as I understand, a dialogue was begun. Whether it was begun widely enough or not, I am not aware.
Okay.
Roughly 6 months ago between the two organizations. Personally, I was made aware of of Dr. Melton and Mr. Richard's plans and concerns in the last week or two. I was not aware of a statewide dialogue on that proposal, but I understand from others that it has existed, just haven't been aware. So clearly there's not been a broad sharing of thinking on these issues, probably from either party. I think the question in front of us here is there promise in what's being proposed? Is there the hope of the two efforts coming together, knowing that the people that we're hearing from today work together every single day of every single year? And then secondly, should we put the brakes on it in light of that, or should we move it forward with a caveat? I think that's the simple question.
All right. Does that satisfy you for now?
Yes.
Okay. If there's no other discussion, I see you at your mic here. If there's no other discussion, then we're going to call the vote here. So the motion for you is to approve this item 8. Do I hear any objections? With no objections, item is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
What is our next item?
Your next item is on page 58, item 5.3. Consideration of LDE contracts of $50,000 and over. The recommendation is to approve.
Do I have a motion to approve? Dr. Bofi, and a second? Ms. Holloway? Any discussion from the board?
Members, I'd like, because we have one contract today, I do just, and I've briefed you on this previously, but just to give you a summary, the law requires that school systems and the state have an independent entity that reviews charter school proposals for the academic and organizational factors that they have to perform to before they get to you. Thus, on the applications you'll be hearing from later today, you'll be provided an independent review rather than simply a state administration review. This contract is a contract for 1 year with the option to extend it for 2 years. This entity was selected through a competitive procurement, first starting 4 years ago. They picked up for a group that had done this work for Louisiana since prior to Katrina at a cheaper cost, and I believe at a more expansive service. I believe they provided us more information in greater depth. That said, later in today's process, you will consider making some amendments to what they do, which is fine. We've made those changes over time as well. But I don't want to sit here and tell you that the process is yet perfect or ever will be. We're going to continue to make changes to it, and we can make those changes once this contract is approved. If you approve them to provide the service, we can work with them to adjust the service so that it can improve over time as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the board before I go to comment cards? If not, then I want to call down to the front Ms. Kim Wechtenheiser along with Mr. David Hartman and also Ms. Sarah Vandergriff, please. Duly noted.
Good morning.
Morning.
Sarah Vandergriff on behalf of the Charter School Association. We just want to say our support for the renewal of the School Works contract. The first step in achieving high-quality charter schools is high-quality authorizing. And high-quality authorizing begins with a high-quality evaluation. While the purpose of an evaluation is not to dictate to you as a board as to how to do your job, it is there and required by law to assist you in making difficult decisions as to who should be granted the privilege of receiving a charter contract, which can often be a complicated and emotional feat. For at least the past 4 years, this board and this state has been repeatedly recognized as setting gold standards on charter school authorizing across the country. And as you all begin your next term, I encourage you to keep pushing those standards forward to ensure to the best of our ability that we use charter schools as a tool to help our state achieve academic excellence. So again, thank you for renewing this contract and committing yourself to being the best authorizer in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, I also have another card here to support recommendation that does not wish to speak. That said, do I hear the motion before you to approve? Do I hear any objection?
So moved.
All right, no objection. Then the motion passes. What's our next? We already had a motion. Sorry, I didn't mean to just ignore you on that one. What's our next item?
On page 60, item 6.1, consideration of a report from Education Finance staff concerning Type 5 charter school budgets and expenditure reports, including irregularities or concerns. The recommendation is to receive.
Do I have a motion from the board to receive? Moved by Mr. Garvey, second. Ms. Orange-Jones. Any discussion from the board? If there's no discussion, then do I hear any objection? With no objection, the motion passes. Next item, please.
Next item is page 67, item 6.2, consideration of an update report on RSD capital projects. The recommendation is to receive.
Do I hear a motion from the board to receive? So moved. So moved by Mr. Garvey, second by Dr. Bophy. Any discussion? Superintendent White?
Members, just to give you a reminder of this, you play as a board many of the administrative and governance functions that a traditional school board would play, a local school board would play when it comes to the state authorized recovery school district. As you know, that's created in the Constitution and in the statutes of the state. You are the board charged with oversight of its fiscal affairs, and so your relationship is not exactly like that of a local school board to a local school district, but it has some similar entities. For example, you have a role in appointing the officials that steer the implementation of a post-Katrina $2 billion capital investment that the state has been charged with overseeing. and the operations of which are thus housed in New Orleans. It's a shared project, but the project management resides with the state, not with the Orleans Parish School Board. Important to note, you thus receive a report at every meeting of the progress on that project. There are not decisions to make at this moment in time, but you receive that report. This board will exist in this iteration when the completion of that $2 billion is over. In other words, that completion is about 2 years away. The schools in New Orleans will have been reconstructed, and every child in Orleans Parish Public Schools will attend a new, a renovated, or a refurbished school building by that time. I hope you'll have a chance to visit the schools, not just, of course, the facilities, but the kids. I hope you'll have a chance to drop down to St. Bernard Parish while you're down there. Pay my respects. But I wanted you to know why you're receiving this report at this time. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. Are there any other comments from the board? If not, do I hear any objections? With no objections, the motion passes. Report received. Next item.
On page 116, item 6.3, consideration of change orders subject to approval by the Joint Legislative Committee on the Budget. Recommendation is to approve.
Do I have a motion from the board to approve these consideration of change orders? Move it, Dr. Murphy, second by Ms. Holloway. Any discussion from the board? If there's no discussion, or any objection? With no objection, the motion passes. Next item, please.
On page 120, item 6.4, consideration of RSD contracts and leases of $50,000 and over. The recommendation is to approve.
Do I have a motion from the board to approve? So moved. Mr. Garvey, second.
I second.
Mr. Thompson. Any discussion from the board on this item? It's been seconded. With no discussion or any objection? With no objection, the motion passes. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 128, item 7.2, consideration of reports in response to resolutions of the 2015 legislative session. The recommendations are to 1, approve, and 2, authorize.
So moved. And second, so moved by Dr. Brophy, second by Mr. Rock. Do I have any discussion from the board at this time? If not, I do have some comment cards. If I could have Ms. Janine Burns please come to the front, as well as Mr. Scott Richard.
If I may.
While they're coming down, Superintendent White, go ahead.
Thank you. Members, as I've mentioned to you in briefings, it is really only at this meeting, this January meeting, when you are asked to receive and approve a number of reports that have been requested by the legislature. And as those of you who are familiar with the legislative process know, the legislature doesn't just pass laws, they create resolutions which typically urge and request you to study something, and the Department of Education does that on your behalf. Oftentimes we will do that in conjunction with partner agencies. In this case, Dr. Burns is representing, I assume today, the Board of Regents. We were charged with co-developing a response to a specific resolution regarding educator preparation. I would imagine that that is what Dr. Burns is here to address. And we were very privileged to work with them on this issue. It was a lengthy process. She put in a ton of time to getting it right. Occasionally, they will request that we work with other entities too. And Mr. Richard is here representing the School Boards Association on some of the issues. It is requested that we consult them in the process as well. So happy to answer any of your questions after the comments about each individual report, but know that this generates from the legislature asking us to study something.
Thank you. Ms. Burns?
My name is Jean Burns. I'm Associate Commissioner for Teacher and Leader Initiatives for the Louisiana Board of Regents. And I do want to begin by congratulating all of you, thanking you for serving as members of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. The Board of Regents and BESE both have had a very good relationship for a very long time period now, and we're looking forward with continuing to have a very positive relationship as we move forward within the future. I'm here today to just provide 2 observations pertaining to House Concurrent Resolution 126, which studied issues pertaining to teacher preparation. We were very fortunate to be able to work with the Department of Education for Higher Ed to provide feedback pertaining to the draft reports that were developed by the Department of Education. The recommendations within the report are consistent with recommendations that have been shared during the last 2 years with campuses across our state. We had some questions pertaining to residencies dealing with undergraduates, and there's information within the recommendations to do further study on this before policies are implemented. So I just want to start off by saying that we do appreciate the fact that we have been involved. We had 2 observations within the report, though, that we did want to share with you. Our campuses have provided us feedback, and they're aware of the statement and the information that I'm about to provide to you. With one of the observations, higher education had provided information and some recommendations to be included within the report, and those recommendations are not within the report. Therefore, the Board of Regents is going to be working with our campuses, working with district partners. We'll also be working with the Department of Education. But we are going to be preparing a report that we will provide to the legislature that will include that information and those recommendations as well as more. And we will share that information with you at the time that we develop the report. As an example of what I'm talking about, the BESE as well as Board of Regents and campuses have created more rigorous requirements in order for candidates to be admitted and complete teacher preparation programs. We're now to a point where we have 100% passage rate on licensure. With the recent data dashboard, we had 84 to 86% of completers where they had Compass final evaluation scores that were highly effective and proficient effective. So we have seen some improvements occur within the teacher preparation programs. However, we are finding that the more rigorous requirements are resulting in us having fewer undergraduate students entering into teacher preparation programs and completing teacher preparation programs. Therefore, we developed some recommendations for incentives in order to attract more undergraduates to go into teacher prep, and those are the types of recommendations that we would like to be able to go forth in the report that we will be preparing for the legislature. So what we'll be doing is going over and beyond. We're not going to be doing anything that is going to contradict the report that is already exists. The second observation pertains to a statement within the report which refers to students with the highest ACT scores, 27 or higher, receiving higher effectiveness ratings than their peers with ACT scores below 27. While the statement is accurate, when you look at the data, we had concerns that the public might interpret this to mean that the higher the ACT score, the more effective the completers when they become first and second year teachers. The data actually did not show that. What the data showed was that when we had teachers with ACT scores that were below 20, they actually demonstrated greater effectiveness than ACT scores that were 20 to 26. When we looked at those that had ACT scores below 20 and those with ACT scores 27 and above, there was only a 2% difference in effectiveness. What the results showed was once you have ACT scores of 20 and above, it's the quality of the program more so than the ACT scores that determines the effectiveness of the teachers. So therefore, we just want to emphasize the fact that placing a focus on the improvement of the quality of the experiences within the teacher preparation programs is what the focus should be in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Scott Reshore with the School Boards Association, and to Dr. Burns and the work of the Board of Regents on this report. I know the resolution called for some dialogue with local governing authorities. We would welcome the dialogue. It is vitally important to every school board, superintendent, and principal in this state that we have accurate information reported to the legislature that can be used as a guide and a resource. Thus the intent of the resolution, because we all know districts around the state that struggle to find high-quality teachers for our classrooms. So we look forward to working with you moving forward in dealing with the legislature's keen interest in making sure we have high-quality programs and well-trained teachers in our schools. The other comments today on this item are in regards to the 2 handouts that were passed out. It's vitally important as well that we all work together as school boards, the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, and the legislature. We have lots of hard work in front of us in the coming days. And thus the reason for passing out these 2 resolutions, we have found over the last 3 years at the School Boards Association that we do not take resolutions lightly, that we work collaboratively with legislators because they ultimately make the laws that affect all of us. These 2 resolutions were not addressed in this agenda item, and it's basically for your reference. This is a new year. We've all been busy. You're just taking office today. We've got an inauguration yesterday. But the written word, the request of legislators we have found are not frivolous. And therefore, we're passing these out to you today for your information. The item that deals with the MFP task force and determining the true cost of educating a student, again, is a vitally important item for all of us to be aware of. Hopefully we will continue to address this through the MFP task force mechanism that's in place. The other item by Senator Murray, Senate Resolution number 190, was not on the report today. This is also a hot topic for the upcoming legislative session. And what our accountability system looks like, letter grade labeling, the validity and reliability of the current system. Be glad to discuss with this issue or these 2 issues with any of you offline. Thank you for taking the time to allow me to present these to you and pass these out for your reference today. Thank you.
Thank you both for your comments.
Mr. David?
Yes, Ms. O'Shea?
I have a comment. Dr. Burns, I'm glad that you're looking at additional recommendations, and I'm going to be anxious to see that because we do have such a critical shortage of certified and qualified teachers. I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at the correlation, as you were talking about, between the ACT scores and the effectiveness, and really it's not a statistically valid correlation according to this data, in terms of seeing that the higher the ACT score, the better performance of the teacher. I'm a little bit concerned, and I'm looking at the recommendations that the department has put in this document, and one of them that it says to reward programs for recruiting academically promising teacher candidates who become certified and teach in Louisiana. And I'm hoping that recommendation is more than just aligning or rewarding programs that recruit the people with the highest ACT scores, because that's not a direct correlation between, in my opinion, the higher the score, the more effectiveness, the more effective the teacher. I think Dr. Burns is spot on in terms of the quality of the teacher preparation program and those experiences that they have within it. So I would hope that recommendation, as it is general, but to reward programs for recruiting academically promising teacher candidates, I'm hoping that is not, John, Superintendent, what is that meant to be a direct correlation?
No, we were required by the resolution to study this issue.
Okay.
And I think I've reached a pretty fair conclusion, which is, working with Dr. Burns, we've worded that there is no correlation that's evident in this specific research. And this has been a pretty hotly contested subject, as Dr. Burns can attest, nationally, and we're very cautious about approaching this issue, and we will be in policy as well.
Okay, so that is not one of the recommendations, even though it's under that section that you have in this report.
It's not. No.
All right.
And if I could just add there, having to do this resolution really turned out to be very important because it is providing us information to show that teachers with varying levels of ACT scores while they're in high school can actually be effective as a teacher after they've been involved in the teacher preparation program. But I think something else that was very important that came out in the information that is being reported, there's a table there showing the distribution of ACT scores. And of the ACT scores reported, 90% of the teachers or the individuals reported had ACT scores of 20 and above. That's a result of the more rigorous policies BESE has put in place, Board of Regents has put in place, and our campuses have put in place, because our teacher preparation programs, especially our undergraduates, if you do not already demonstrate the ability to be able to demonstrate effectiveness, you cannot get into or get out of an undergraduate teacher preparation program at this time. So again, I think the study was important. It's given us a better understanding of ACT scores. It's given us a better understanding of the performance of teachers that we now have that are in our undergraduate programs and the kind of ACT scores that were exhibited in the data that was reported.
Thank you very much for that. Very insightful. Appreciate you. At this time, I have 3 more comment cards. Thank you, too. If I could get Ms. Melanie Bromfin, Mr. John Warner Smith, and Mr. Sean Fleming, please, to the front. Whoever wants to start, go ahead.
I'll go first. Good morning. Can you hear me? I'll hug this mic. So
stay close to the mic.
If I'm too loud, let me know. I'm John Warner Smith, Chief Executive Officer of Education's Next Horizon. And I'm here to speak in support of the report that was submitted by Superintendent White and his staff in fulfilling the requirements of House Concurrent Resolution 174. That report is in your packet. I haven't had the chance to review the report in detail, but saw the scanned over it, and it looks like a great document. The appendix of that report has another document that is a product of the work of the Early Care and Education Advisory Council, actually a subgroup of that council was created to assist the department in framing a set of recommendations in response to HCR 174. And so in December, the council created an ad hoc funding work group comprised of some members of the council and some outside experts. And we met to address 2 issues. One, to assist in fulfilling the requirements of HCR 174. One, to identify a funding target for the coming fiscal year to fully fund and implement the funding model that most of you are aware of that was created in response to another House Concurrent Resolution 61 that would enable the full implementation of Act 3. And so in part 2, the second objective of the ad hoc funding work group, in addition to identifying a funding target, was to identify some funding options and strategies for fully implementing the funding model. The funding model, of course, calls for an investment of an additional $80 million in early care and education. So what you have before you as an appendix to the staff's report that will be going to the legislature is the report of the ad hoc funding work group. So I just want to say, I won't go into our recommendations in detail, but I do want to say that, you know, it was back in 2009, just give a little more background about our involvement in this and where we are today. In 2009, our organization, Education's Next Horizon, and some other advocates, you know, came together to begin to study this issue of school readiness and came up with a definition of school readiness. BESE, you adopted a definition of kindergarten readiness in Louisiana. I think it was in 2011. And then, of course, a year later, in 2012, Act 3 was enacted, which established this comprehensive integrated system that is working today to ensure kindergarten readiness for all kids in Louisiana. And credit to Superintendent White and his staff. Since 2012, tremendous progress has been made. Tremendous progress. I mean, it's really like night and day. But the big problem in going forward is a money problem. We cannot fully implement Act 3. We cannot achieve kindergarten readiness for the kids of Louisiana, the children, especially the youngest children and most at-risk children in our state, unless we find a way to fully fund Act 3. And that's what this concurrent resolution really is all about. So I urge you to dig into it, read it carefully in detail, and join with us. The advocates who are on the ground and ready. We've been pushing this issue for several years now. We've been advocating the funding. Join with us in at least trying to persuade our state that this is probably, given all the problems that we have, structural budget problems in Louisiana, this should be priority one. It's the best investment that Louisiana can make for our children and families. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Smith. Ms. Bronfman? Make sure your microphone is on, please.
Oh, there we go. Lights on. Good. Thank you. I'm Melanie Bronfman with the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that is a source of data, research, and information to policymakers such as yourself, stakeholders, and folks around the state on information relating to issues for children birth through age 4. And early care and education has been our focus over the last few years. And we look forward to, it's so fun to look up and see all these new faces. We look forward to working with y'all as you go forward and being hopefully a source of information for you on our early care and education system. John said it so well. We have made huge progress, but it has been very difficult because it has been basically an unfunded mandate that has come down to the state and come down to the districts. And everyone has been struggling to do the reforms we've been mandated to do by the legislature without the funding that we need to do it. But I too have the privilege of serving on your advisory council. You have an advisory council, I hope you're aware, on early care and education. It actually is a statutorily created council appointed by y'all and by the superintendent. And as John mentioned, we actually added an addendum in the addendum to the report, and this is the report on House Concurrent Resolution 174, which was a resolution asking y'all and the department to come up with a way to fund Act 3, basically, the funding needed for Act 3, to look at sources of data, of funding, look at what other states have done to try to fund their early childhood systems, and then to make recommendations based on that. The department did a fabulous job at laying all that out and giving history of the funding and history of the work we've been doing. So it's a great synopsis for you on what's been going on, all the hard work that's been going on. And also, the advisory council felt like we needed to do a little bit stronger the advocates among us call to action, and that's what really the that report, our addendum does. It's sort of a more strong call to action on specific things that might be done. I would just call to your attention, in our addendum we note that our state spends less than 1/2 of 1% of our state general funds on early care and education now. Less than 1/2 of 1%. Meanwhile, economists across the country, Nobel Prize winning economist Dr. Heckman being the foreman, talk about there's no better investment a state can make for return on investment than early care and education. In addition, we have cut by 60% the amount of money that we are putting into our child care assistance program. We've cut the number of kids we are serving from 40,000 down to 15,000 over the last 6 years. This is a crisis for our working families who are trying to go to work and still have their children in high-quality early learning settings. The result is not surprising. Almost half of our kids, according to the Department of Ed data, 46% of kids are entering kindergarten already behind. And y'all are having, in K through 12, to catch them up with special ed, with retention, all these expensive, difficult things. Whereas if we could get it right before they get there, and now y'all are in the early learning system, it would be better for everyone, certainly. A number of y'all, you may recall, you filled out a survey and questionnaires when you were running for office for cable and the League of Women Voters, among others, and many of y'all said in that survey you wanted to work on this topic. So we noted that, and we look forward to holding you to that, and we look forward, more importantly, to working with you. And hopefully, y'all can help us educate your colleagues across the street. I think I'm pointing in the right direction. So they understand these issues, and they understand the great needs that we have for your youngest constituents, y'all's youngest constituents, birth through 4, and we look forward to doing that with you over the coming months and years. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bronfman. Mr. Fleming?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Sean Fleming.
Make sure your mic is on.
Is this good?
There we go.
Now hear me? Thanks. Sean Fleming again, Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council. I'd like to speak to the report y'all have in front of you on positive behavioral interventions and supports, on the effectiveness and the implementation. I have a fairly intimate knowledge of PBIS, and it was sort of gratifying to see what I already knew, that if it's implemented with fidelity, it is effective. It's effective with increasing instruction time, is demonstrated by reduced out of school, out of class, suspensions, expulsions, etc. It also is attributed to higher academics. There are some other things about teacher satisfaction, retention, etc. that, you know, if you go cruise the literature on it. But what's interesting to me is that the department no longer really supports positive behavioral supports and interventions. Intervention support, sorry, it used to be PBIS. We were told to stop doing that. And so with all this evidence showing the effectiveness of it, and it was a relatively small amount of resources and funds, the department now does not know, and you do not know, and we do not know the level of implementation, whether it's being implemented at all. But some other things that are striking to me, because I come from serving kids with significant challenging behaviors. I was actually on the team in 1993. We were trained down in Thibodeau, the original team, and it wasn't about school-wide at all. It was about those kids who had the most intense challenging behaviors and figuring out proactive, positive educational approaches to support them. And a bill that passed 5 years ago, Act 328, regulated the use of restraints and seclusions. And I look at the use of reactions to behavior like restraints and seclusions, similar to suspensions, expulsions, office referrals, etc. It's just an indicator of a teacher or a person who has exceeded their ability to deal with that situation at that time, or in kids with disabilities in restraint seclusion, you know, a need to protect the kid. The council has on one of our goals tracking positive behaviors and reducing aversive behaviors such as restraint seclusion. We were strongly behind 328 when it came out, and we continue to ask for data on it. We were given two pieces of data from the years of 2011-12 and 12 and 13 that indicated that statewide there were 17 instances one year and I think 19 instances the other year, which I questioned because I'd seen more than that. I was the state coordinator for autism for the Department of Ed. I worked for the Positive Behavioral Support Intervention and Supports for 20 years. Those numbers look suspicious. Recently, we discovered that the department is going to start collecting data on restraints and seclusion, which made me ask the question of, because I wanted to see what is the pattern. That's what we're looking at. Because when I look at the expulsions and suspensions, since the department stopped doing positive behavioral intervention support school-wide, some of those numbers are going back up. But what is, I guess, concerning is the department had not been collecting data on restraints and seclusions as required by law to manage that data set, so we could not see those patterns. And I don't know what else to say other than 2 points I would like for y'all to consider. One is if you have a program such as positive behavioral intervention and supports, which is clearly effective, and it's effective not only with changing student behaviors but their academic progress, or are we using our money strategically? Do we have a strategic use of money was the conversation previously. If we know that behavior is consuming an inordinate amount of people's time, I implore y'all to encourage the department to take up its role in supporting this initiative again. And the second part is it involves the kids at the highest end of that triangle, the kids who have severe challenging behaviors. Parents are letting us know that school systems don't know the law like they should. They're not telling parents when the kid is restrained, and the state is not informing us. And I'm glad they're starting to collect the data, but I don't know how they share data that previously, and I'm not sure if a lot of other data sources, the special education data profile is no longer published. I asked for the data and I could not receive it. They said they didn't do a specific report. And I encourage y'all to make data available so that we as a community can collectively look at what's going on and make suggestions, and you can have adequate stakeholder input. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. All right.
Mr. Davis, can I ask a question of the superintendent?
Certainly.
Superintendent White, is there a reason that data has not been made available?
There is a large volume of data collected on both students with disabilities and on discipline reports. I think that, frankly, I don't know the exact report that Mr. Fleming is referring to. He's not made these concerns known to me previously, but I'd be happy, Sean, to meet with you and to have that discussion perhaps at the next advisory panel or something of that nature. It's an issue I'd be happy to discuss.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments from the board? Thank you all for your comments. If not, I need to clarify, we do have a motion for approve and authorize, but what I really need is a motion. I'd like to make that a motion to approve the resolutions that we have in front of us. We'll then need an additional motion for authorizing Act 364. So a motion to approve right now from Ms. Orange-Jones, second from Ms. Edmonston. Do I hear any opposition to the approval of these resolutions, of these reports? Without opposition, those are approved. Can I get a motion to authorize Act 364? Moved by Mr. Garvey, second by Mr. Rock. Do I hear any opposition to that authorization? If there's no opposition, that motion passes as well. Thank you. What's our next item?
On page 183, item 8.1, consideration of an update report regarding the Minimum Foundation Program Task Force. The recommendation is to receive.
Do I have a motion from the board to receive this report? Dr. Jones, second. Ms. Holloway? All right. Do I have any comments from the board at this time before we go to comment cards? If not, I'd like to ask Mr. Michael Falk Ms. April Dunn, Mr. Sean Fleming, and Ms. Ashley McReynolds to please come to the front for your comments.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes, while they're coming down, I did have a question. In the minutes from this last meeting, I noticed that there was a request or talk about getting an Attorney General's opinion, and heard or read an email that expressed some concern about the progress on that. Superintendent, have we asked for that, or are we planning to, or what is the status?
Well, it's not the most fortuitous time, unfortunately, to ask for an Attorney General's opinion, because the Attorney General is different today from who he was the day before. So we have drafted it, and our General Counsel, Joan Hunt, who is here, will be submitting it to the new Attorney General immediately.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead and begin with the comments.
Yes, Michael Falk, Superintendent of Schools, Central Community School System, and member of the task force. And for the new board members, kind of give you a brief history. The MFP used to stand for Mike Falk's problem, but now it's everybody's problem. But I wanted to comment about the recommendation from the committee. And I want to say that the committee as a whole, even though we had some disagreements, we were able to work out some things. And we understand that given Commissioner Darden's review of the budget situation and the potential budget, we're asking the board to seriously consider the recommendation from the task force with this in mind, that if a formula is sent over and it's rejected by the legislature, then it reverts back to the last formula that was approved. So we would ask that you seriously consider the recommendation from the task force whenever the board deliberates and submits the budget, and they have discussions with the legislative leadership and the governor's office, because we believe the governor is still committed to trying to find that money. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next comment.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak to BESE and to the chair. My name is April Dunn. I'm the Vice President of the Louisiana Development of Disabilities Council. The MFP task force, I would like to see more stakeholders to be involved, such as like parents or individual with disability, to be involved in the meetings and the construction. And I would also like for the MFP task force to to reconsider the funding for charter schools to serve kids with disability. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn.
Good morning. Ashley McReynolds. I'm a parent of a child with a disability in East Baton Rouge Parish school system, and I'm also have been a member of the MFP task force for the last several years. The minutes really didn't clearly spell out the issues that were raised at the last MFP task force meeting on December 2nd, nor did the motion made address an issue that I have been coming to the task force with and this board for the last 4 years. I appreciate the update on the AG's opinion. I hope that the council will receive a copy of that when it's sent over as well, so I'm going to skip over that. But the law is very clear, and it indicates that the calculations for charter schools are based on the local revenues, are supposed to follow the same weights in the MFP formula like was done for the state costs. I realize that there is a disagreement, which is why an AG opinion is being sought for this, but it's creating a massive hardship on local traditional public schools. It's millions of dollars, and the range is about 2% to 30, almost 31%, is being diverted from traditional public schools into charter schools because they're receiving funding based on a flat rate, not on actual student characteristics. So I just wanted to bring that to this board, that it wasn't clear in the minutes that were presented to you that this was an issue that is continuing to be addressed at the MFP task force, and I hope that this is the last time I come in front of this board and bring this issue up, because it's one I've been bringing up for about 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Mr. Fleming, did you want anything? No? Do we have any comments from the board at this time before we go to the vote? If not, then I'll need, do I hear any objections to the motion? With no objection, the motion passes. Do we have any other business today?
That concludes your agenda.
So I need to do an adjournment vote? Yeah. Can I get a, we're adjourned. Meeting's over with. Thank you all.